Adding authentication to Next.js applications has never been easier and more scalable than with Auth.js. In this tutorial, you'll learn how to implement a comprehensive authentication system using a database with Prisma or other ORMs, along with various authentication methods, including OAuth providers like GitHub and Google, as well as traditional email and password sign-up using the latest versions of Auth.js and Next.js. Many of my viewers haven't subscribed to my channel yet. Creating high-quality free tutorials for YouTube is both challenging and time-consuming. If you find this content helpful, please consider liking and subscribing to support my work. Thank you. To start with the tutorial, just head over to the repository in the description down below. Now, if you want to follow along with the tutorial, you can clone the starter branch on this repository. Otherwise, if you want to access the complete code and final project, you can clone the master branch like this. Just clone it and open it in your preferred IDE, and then follow along with the rest of the tutorial. After cloning the repository, just open the terminal. Make sure that you at least have Node version 20. Here I'm using 22. Then install the packages using npm install. Perfect. Now type npm run dev to start the development server. Now if you open your browser on port 3000, you see a very simple starting point for our tutorial, which we are going to add functionality to it later and show the signed in user email here instead of to do. Now head over to the sign up route like this. We see a very common sign up or create account page here where user can create an account with GitHub or other providers like Google, or create and continue with his email by providing his email and password. And after signing up, the user will be automatically redirected to the sign-in page. If we click on this link here, we see our similar and very simple sign-in page where the user can also sign in with his GitHub account or continue with his created account. But currently, none of these buttons will work and we need to implement the functionality. But before I continue, I just want you to know that creating high quality free tutorials for YouTube is both challenging and time consuming. If you find this content helpful, please consider liking and subscribing to help me out. Thanks a lot. The project structure is a very common Next.js project. Let me just open the package.json here. Before the tutorial, I have installed and set up the project with chatcn and install the Lucid React library using Tailwind, but you can use any other UI components library solution if you want. This tutorial is not dependent on them. Now in the src folder here, we have three folders: app, components, and lib folder. Inside the lib folder, we have simple utilities, the CN utility created by chatcn CLI, the execute action, which is a very simple utility that we're gonna use in this tutorial to handle our actions and handle their errors using a try-catch block like this, and returning a success message or failure message like this in the response. And we are gonna use all of our server actions, which are not too much in this tutorial, using execute action, which is a very good practice in Next.js world to wrap and manage all of your actions using a global function like this, which is a very simple utility. Now in the components folder, we have GitHub sign-in, which is the button here, but currently the server action on this form is not implemented yet and the button is not working. Next, we have our sign out button here, which we have saw it earlier on our landing, but again, we are going to implement the functionality here later. Also, there are a few more components created by chatcn CLI, which is not related to this tutorial. A simple button like this, an input field, also the icon for the GitHub icon here. Now for our app folder structure here, I have removed unnecessary files to make it less cluttered. First of all, we have our common Next.js layout like this, but also I have added a centered container for the children content to add a good drop shadow and make all of our content for this tutorial centered in the middle of the screen. Also, the homepage of our project has a sign out button, which we have saw earlier. Also, in this tutorial, we're gonna change these to the user's email to the user signed in email. Now, inside our authorization routes, which I have grouped them using the parentheses, which is a common practice in Next.js, to wrap and separate your different parts of the project and layouts for better organization. For example, I'm gonna use all things and pages related to the authentication in this folder, and public routes inside another group like this. For example, public for my publicly accessible pages on the web. But for now, I'm going to remove it here. And also, this folder is not affecting our final URL structure of our application. It's just for better organization. Now, inside our signing page, I have set up a very simple common signing page like this. And also, we're gonna add functionality to this signing form here by fill this action on our form, and nothing much special. And also for our sign up page, this is mostly the same. And also we're gonna complete this action on our sign up form. Also, we're gonna implement and enhance this common GitHub signing button, which the user is gonna see both on signing page and the sign up page for better user experience. Now, this was a quick overview of our current starter template. Now, let's start with the main part of the tutorial, which is setting up our authentication config. Let me just close everything here and collapse all of the folders. Perfect. Now open the terminal and stop the dev server and install the next-auth package, but with the version of beta, which is version 5 of this library. Hit enter. Perfect. After that, we need to implement a very secure and random secret phrase and put it inside our env file for the next-auth library to work. The easiest way to do it is using npx auth secret, and if you have not this package installed on your system, it's gonna ask a yes or no question, and you must select yes. And after that, if you head over to our explorer here and open the .env.local here, we see that the command created a secure random secret phrase inside our env file, but for simplicity, I'm gonna change the .env.local file into a simple .env like this. Perfect. Let me just close it. And again, just from the development server like this. Now, after that, we need to start setting up our authentication config like this. Inside your lib folder here, create a new file called auth.ts. Then head over to the auth.js library documentation, and on the homepage of it, just copy these 3 lines here, and inside our new file, just paste them like this. Then to start, just remove the GitHub from imports and the provider itself. This file is going to be responsible to handle and manage most of the things related to the authentication in the Next.js globally, and we're going to extend it so much more in the rest of the tutorial. Then for Auth.js to work properly, we need to create another file, which is going to be a very simple route handler that the next-auth or Auth.js is going to use it under the hood to manage the providers like GitHub and Google and handle their callback links and automate so much other things. Open your file explorer like this, and inside the app folder, just create another folder called API. Just pay attention that this path must be exactly like this for Auth.js to work properly. Inside API, create another folder called Auth, and inside this folder, create a catch-all route like this using the catch-all route syntax provided by Next.js like this by opening and closing brackets with 3 dots at the beginning of the folder name. Just hit enter, and at the end, create a route.ts file here. Again, head over to the documentation itself, and from here, just copy these 2 lines here and paste them here. But because we have our handlers and auth.ts file in another folder, let me just remove it and use the IntelliSense of VS Code to import it automatically. Perfect. This was the initial setup of Auth.js library for our project, which was very simple by only creating a route.ts file and an auth.ts file. And most of the things and common things are pre-configured by this amazing library itself. And after that, we're gonna just customize the things the way that we want and use the pre-configured features of this library and only the features that we want. Now let's head over to the page.tsx or our homepage of our application. Then we want to make this to do here the users, the signed in users email, and also, for example, we don't want a user that is not signed in our website to do not have access, for example, to particular pages, and in this example, to our homepage here. So we are gonna restrict the not signed in user from our homepage, for example. It's very simple by the help of the Next.js and next-auth like this. Just create a new variable called session or whatever that you want, and just make sure your component, and in Next.js, your server component is of type async, and we're gonna await for our auth function that we just created earlier to return the current user's session as simply as this. Now, the thing that we want here, if the user, or in other words, if the session is not presented and if it is null or undefined, we're gonna redirect our user to the sign-in page like this and import the redirect from next navigation. And if the user session is presented, we can continue and show the user the rest of our page. And this session variable is going to provide us with all the things that we want to handle and manage the user's session. For example, we can access to the signed in users email, name, ID, and so much more. And also we can extend the capabilities of the session using the power of TypeScript and Auth.js. But for now, just we want to redirect the user to the signed in page if he's not logged in. To see that in action, if I head over to the main page of our application, the page that we just changed it earlier, if I hit enter, we see that automatically we got redirected to the signed in page because we are not logged in to our application yet, and currently we do not have a valid session set on our cookies, which is exactly the behavior that we want. One of the many features and benefits that Auth.js provides us is the many ways and pre-configured ways and methods that we can use to handle authentication inside our application. We have OAuth, magic links, and credentials, which we are going to examine it thoroughly. Now, if you scroll down a little bit in the documentation and open the providers, we see a very rich list of providers pre-configured by the amazing community behind the Auth.js. We have our users can sign in or sign up using their Discord account, Dropbox account, GitHub, which we are going to use in this tutorial, and each of them has their unique setup and documentation to make our lives easier. For you to see the power of Auth.js and its simplicity, we're going to implement a very quick OAuth inside our application using the GitHub provider here. The only requirements for using the GitHub provider for our OAuth Integration inside our application is to have access to a GitHub ID and a GitHub secret, which we are gonna see how we can get them from the GitHub website itself, which is pretty straightforward. Also, if you want to use other providers, you can follow along their documentation, but the general flow of them are pretty the same, and in most of them, you need to have access to an ID and a secret phrase provided by that provider itself, which they are pretty straightforward. Now, to get these variables for our application, open your GitHub profile, click on your profile icon here and head over to the settings page, then scroll down and at the end click on developer settings, then click on the OAuth apps here click on new button here. Now for the application name, I'm gonna put something very simple like Auth.js Next.js. For our homepage URL, because currently we are working on localhost on our machine, just put http localhost port 3000. And also for the callback URL, just paste this route from your application, which is address is also provided by Auth.js documentation. And at the end, click on register application. After that, the application is created successfully. Just head over down a little bit. This is our client ID. Also, we need to generate the secret that we need for our application. Just click on it. Again, scroll down a little bit. And as you can see here, the GitHub has created a new secret phrase, but just make sure that you save it in a very secure place and also write it down somewhere, because after closing this page, you do not even then again head over to the application here, and inside the .env file here, we need to add 2 more variables for our GitHub provider. And just let me remove unnecessary comments here. Perfect. Now we just need to copy and paste the generated values for these environment variables. Just paste the GitHub ID here and also the GitHub secret here like this. Also, just add a general environment variable here to remove the issues and problems during building an application. Now that we have added our new GitHub ID and GitHub secret, we just again need to head over to the auth.ts file, and in here just use the GitHub class provided by the library itself. And currently all the things are going to be handled by Auth.js, and most of the important settings are pre-configured by the library itself. And also because we need to let our users to sign in inside our application, just destruct another method from the next-auth, the signing method of it. And after that, we have exported the signing method from our config here. Then just head over to the component folder, and inside that, in the GitHub signing component, we just need to add our signing with GitHub, which is pretty simple. Just add this single line here. We're going to first of all await sign-in, which we are going to get it from our auth config file here. And after that, just pass the GitHub here for our authentication with GitHub be completed. Perfect. Now everything is set up. Now just again head over to the application and click on continue with GitHub here. And after that, you're going to be redirected to the GitHub provider. But as you can see here, I made a mistake here, because inside my environment and at the end of the secret, I have extra spaces, and it's caused my OAuth config to not work. Again, I need to redo the sign-in flow. Just head over to the application here, and again, head over to the homepage of our application. And then I'm going to click on continue with GitHub. And as you can see here, currently we are signed in inside our application, and everything is handled with Auth.js and GitHub with an amazing simplicity for the user and in a very secure way. But as you can see here, when the user is signed in, or in other words, if the user session is not null and is valid, we do not want to let the user to go to the sign-in page again. So we need to redirect the user automatically if he has a valid session. So just head over to the application again. Then just head over to the signing page like this. And above the component here, just add these simple lines here, import auth and redirect. And if the user session is not null and is valid, we just need to redirect the user to the homepage. So if I again open our application, as you can see here, the user automatically is redirected to the homepage. If I again try to go to the signing page here, we see that the user cannot see the signing page anymore, and he's going to be redirected to the homepage automatically. Also, now we can show the signed in user email here. Head over to the application here, go to the homepage of the application, and instead of hard coding a to-do here, just use the session and the user object on our session like this. And then as you can see, we have access to the ID of our user, the email, the image of his profile, and also the name of it, which all of these data currently are not stored anywhere, but only inside the user's cookies, which is the most secure way to save and handle secure data. So for example, I have access to the user's email, and then if I head over to my application, we see that I'm gonna see the email that I have logged in with GitHub provider. Very simple. And also, for example, I can show the user his avatar like this by the saved image on the session like this. But for this tutorial, I don't need it. So I'm gonna just remove it. And it was just only to give you an idea that what things are possible without changing the default configs of Auth.js. Now also, I want to add the functionality to this button. So when the user clicks on it, I'm gonna just sign out the user from the application, or in other words, I'm gonna make the session null again. So just simply head over to the sign out component here. And as you can see here, we have a very simple button that when the user clicks on it, he's gonna be automatically signed out from the panel. And the logic is very simple. Just await the sign out method provided by Auth.js library, and that's it. And if we head over to our application and click on sign out, we see that everything is handled automatically. And when the user's session is null, he's going to be automatically again redirected to the sign-in page. And again, if he clicks on the continue with GitHub button, he's going to be automatically signed in, and everything is handled very simple with no headaches at all. Now let me just again click on sign out here, and perfect. Although we have implemented our easy signing method using GitHub provider, but also some users may not have GitHub account and only they just have a simple email. So we're gonna need to let them also sign up or signing inside our application with their credentials. But we have not implemented it yet. But with the power of Auth.js, handling user authentication using the credentials, the user's credentials is pretty straightforward using the power of Auth.js. Again, head over to your application. Let me just collapse all open folders. Again, head over to the src folder. Let me just close everything else inside the lib auth.ts. Exactly beside the GitHub provider, we also need to use the credentials provider provided by the Auth.js itself, and also we can pass and configure it with our desire. First of all, for our first field of our passing config to our credentials, just hit Ctrl and space and hit enter on credentials and open another object, another curly braces here like this. These are going to be data that the user for application needs to provide. For simplicity, I'm going to specify a simple email with a simple type of empty object for now and his password as previously. So at this stage, if you want to get, for example, the user's full name or phone number, you can add them here like this, and all the type safety throughout your application is gonna be handled automatically. But for the sake of this tutorial, we're gonna only get the email and password as credentials from our user. Now, after closing this credentials object here, just again hit Ctrl space and enter on authorize here. This is gonna be the logic that we want to check the user's credentials, for example, with our database that we're gonna be implement in a few moments. And if the user's data is valid and presented on the database, we're gonna return the user's object. To save time, I'm gonna paste this simple mock fake authorize method here. It's a very simple method and it's only here to give you an idea that what are we gonna do here. I'm gonna implement a mock user authentication, and only when the user entered this email with this password, and I'm gonna check against it, and if the data is valid, I'm gonna simply return the user's email and password. Otherwise, I'm gonna throw an error that the credentials is invalid. After that, I'm gonna use the signing with credentials method inside my signing page here. Here in the form action of our form, I'm gonna simply use my execute action utility that we just created earlier, and inside its action function, I'm gonna create an async function like this, and inside it, as before, I'm gonna await signing and get this signing from our auth.ts file. And instead of using other providers, I simply pass the credentials provider here, and then I'm gonna pass my form data, which I'm gonna get it from my form here like this with the type of form data. This is gonna be of type email here and the password. it's exactly the same credentials that we have defined on our config. So when the user enters his email and password and clicks on submit button here, the sign in button here, these data are going to be passed as form data to our signing with credential. And the beauty of using this execute action here is that the errors are handled perfectly and our application won't go through the error phase. And the errors are only logged into the console. But for better user experience, I really recommend you to handle errors and, for example, show the user if his credentials is invalid, for example, a toast or simple alert. But for this tutorial, to keep things simple, we're just gonna concentrate on authentication side of things. Now again, if I open the auth.js file, we see that we need to pass the admin@signadmin.com and 1234 for our password for our credentials to work. So inside our application is sign-in page. If I try to sign in with wrong credentials, something like this, and hit on sign in, then if I head over to the terminal here, we see that in the error that credentials is invalid, which is perfect. Now if I want to log in with correct data like this and hit on enter, as you can see, the thing that we are returning here, the email and password, the user is going to be signed in with this data, and we have handled a very simple and mock way to handle credentials inside our application. So far in the tutorial, we have implemented signing with GitHub like this or other providers, and also our credentials signing like this. But in real-world scenarios, handling authentication in this way is not practical because we want to use a real database to save our users' data, whether they are signed in using OAuth or if they have tried to create their own accounts with their credentials, and we need to track our users' accounts and their corresponding sessions and manage them using our database instead of using only cookies, because we need to save and track the users, our platform users' data, and manage them correctly. One of the well-used and popular solutions to handle databases and interact with them is Prisma ORM, which is very powerful and has an amazing integration with Next.js, TypeScript, and also an amazing extension for VS Code for its language, syntax, highlighting, and IntelliSense. Also, if you have not experience with Prisma or you don't know it, I'm gonna keep everything simple in this tutorial and give you instruction how to set up a Next.js TypeScript project with Prisma, which is very simple and straightforward, yet very powerful and commonly used. But before doing anything, just make sure that you have Prisma extension installed on your IDE. Here I'm using VS Code, so just make sure that it's installed for syntax highlighting, linting, and formatting of the Prisma schema itself. After that, just open your terminal. Let me just make it a little bit bigger. Stop the dev server, clear everything, and try to install the Prisma as a development dependency like this. Perfect. Now head over to your file explorer. Inside the lib folder, create a new folder called db, which is everything that we want related to our database and the definitions and the schemas to keep things very organized. Now inside it, just create a very simple file called schema.prisma. Hit enter. And this is the file responsible to create our database tables, our database provider, like for example, what are we going to be using, SQLite, Postgres, and so many other providers. But for simplicity for this tutorial, we're going to use SQLite because you do not need to create and host a database server, and everything is handled by Next.js and Prisma itself. But also you can use your desired database provider and adapter. Like for example, you can host your own Postgres server and use this for this tutorial. Everything mostly is the same. Another trick that I want to mention is just head over to your user settings JSON file here and add just these 3 lines here to enable the auto formatting your Prisma's documents on save like this. First, in this file, we need to, first of all, specify our client. And for our data source here, like this, we're going to use SQLite. And for the URL of our database, which in SQLite word, it's a single file with the extension of DB, we're going to specify its address in our environment like this. So to add this environment variable, just head over to your .env file and create a new variable like this, database URL, with the value of this, which we are telling the Prisma engine that we need to have our database file in the folder of our schema file and inside a folder called data, which is going to be created automatically. And inside that, we are going to have our dev.db file or whatever you desire. Now again, just head over to the Prisma schema again. And then we are going to create a very, very simple table for our database, a user table where it's going to have an auto-generated ID, a UUID, and unique email, and a password. And all of them are of type string. Perfect. Now after that, we need to change some values inside our package.json file here. First of all, we need to specify the address of our schema file, which is inside the src folder, lib, and db folder like this, inside our package.json file like this. We have specified the path to our schema inside another object called the Prisma object. After that, in the script section of our package.json file, I'm going to add another script, which is going to be called db migrate like this. And the thing this is going to do is migrating our database with a specified schema here for our dev environment, which is more than enough for this tutorial. Perfect. Now open the terminal again and run this db migrate command like this. Just type a name for your initial commit, initial migration. I'm going to call it init like this. Now that the command has generated the Prisma client itself, just open the file explorer. As you can see here in the DB folder, we have a new data folder, which has our dev.db file, a migrations folder to manage our direct SQL commands, and that's it. Also, just don't forget to add your data folder inside the gitignore here to remove our database being tracked by our control system. Just at the end of your gitignore, just add this simple line, and after that, our data folder and database will be ignored from our version control system. Also, for simplicity, inside our package.json, I'm going to add another script called db studio, which is going to open up the simple yet very powerful database management client provided by Prisma by default like this. Then just type the command npm run studio like this, and then head over to the localhost port 5555. As you can see, we have migrated our database with our user model like this, with the specified fields inside our schema, the ID field, email, and password column. Now to add records, just click on the add record here and type your desired email. Here in this tutorial, I'm gonna pass our admin.com, and for the password 1234. And as you can see here, the ID is also auto-generated by SQLite itself. And just to give you a heads up, is that never try to save your password on your database, and always try to save them as hashed passwords for better security. But for the sake of this tutorial, we're gonna just directly save our password inside our database directly like this, but never do it in production. So after that, we have created our new user inside our database here. Just let me head over to the auth.js file here. Instead of hard coding everything here, why not try to check everything with our database? To do that, we need to check, instead of checking our credentials like this, with directly checking it with database. So inside our db folder here, let me just close unnecessary things. Sorry, not the db folder, in the lib folder for simplicity, add a new file called db.ts or whatever that you desire. For example, you can also call it prisma.ts. Hit enter and just paste this code snippet provided by Prisma documentation itself, but for simplicity, I just copy it from documentation and I paste it here. I'm not gonna explain in detail that what this does, but all the things that it's doing is using a singleton pattern and is gonna provide us a default export here So whenever that we want to interact with our database, for example, writing or reading out of it, we simply use this default export throughout our application. And also all of the type safeties are going to be handled by this simple pattern here. And whenever we want to interact with our database, we simply use this DB object here, and we're going to see it in a few moments. So inside our auth.ts file, let me just remove all of our mock implementations and let's implement it with our new database. First of all, we're going to get our user from our database like this. We're going to await, import our DB that we just created, put dot here, and as you can see here, we have access to our user table on our schema, and the types are going to be inferred automatically with an amazing developer experience. Hit enter, and we're going to find the first item that our database engine finds. We're going to find the specific user that he wants to log in inside our platform. We want to find the user where the email is equal to credentials.email and the password is equal to credentials.password, like this. But just ignore these red warnings here. We're going to solve them in a few moments. If the database was not able to find a user like this, we simply throw new error as before, like this, with the invalid credentials like this. Otherwise, we're gonna return our user in our authorized method. And then let me just open my terminal. As you can see, we are currently running our Prisma Studio. We do not need it anymore for now. Just stop it and run the Next.js development server like this. Now head over to the application signing page and try to log in with the new row that we just created on our database with the correct password and click on sign in here. As you can see, we have again logged in into our application, but instead of using mock implementation, we're using a real database with a real user. This was the most simple form of handling our user authentication using database. But as you can see here inside our database schema, we see that the implementation is very simple and it is not suitable for production at all. So we need to enhance things much more. So our database can handle our GitHub users or our users that they have signed up or signed in using their credentials. Just again as before, head over to the Auth.js documentations, scroll down a little bit, and inside the adapters here, scroll down to find the Prisma adapter for our application. Also, if you are using other databases like other database ORMs like Type ORM, Drizzle, or many other ORMs inside your application, you can follow along with those documentations, but mostly 90% of instructions are the same. To handle and create an adapter for our Auth.js, for our Prisma, for our Auth.js config, the steps are very simple, and by specifying an adapter, signing in, signing up, or even signing out are going to be handled automatically by Auth.js adapter. And most of the difficult things are going to be handled without us even trying to interact with the database itself most of the times. For example, when the user tries to sign in inside our application, a session is going to be generated on our database automatically. And if the user tries to sign out, the user session is going to be removed from our database, and so much other things that are going to be handled by Auth.js. To get started, the steps are pretty straightforward. Just copy this Prisma adapter, and don't copy this because it has been installed when we have migrated our database. Just copy this package here and head over to the application. In the terminal, type npm install this package, our Prisma adapter package. Perfect. And then in the auth.ts file here, just create an adapter like this, import the Prisma adapter from the new package and pass our database connection like this. And for the adapter itself, I'm going to pass the adapter like this, but for simplicity, I'm going to remove the adapter itself. This and this is logically similar. Let me just remove it like this. Perfect. Now, currently, the Auth.js can directly access and interact with the database under the hood with our Prisma database connection. Now scroll down a little bit further, depending on your desired database driver, whether it's going to be Postgres, MySQL, MongoDB, and SQLite, you can follow the pattern that you need to implement inside your schema. Because we are using SQLite for this tutorial, just click on it, and from this point till the end of this code snippet, copy all things here, head over to your application and inside your Prisma schema here, and replace your current table with the new copied data from Auth.js. As you can see, the Auth.js provides us and gave us a user table here with these specific fields. You can also extend it to your needs, but don't try to remove current fields and columns because you might break something. Just try to extend it, not remove any fields. Also, we have one-to-many relations between the user table with account table, which is going to be our OAuth signed in users accounts, our logged in users sessions here, which is pretty useful if you want to manage or invalidate your user session automatically and monitor your users' sessions. And all the other things are related to OAuth that under the hood, the Prisma will handle and manage most of the hard works. Just the thing that we have done here is that copied and paste the schema provided by Auth.js documentation itself into our schema, Prisma schema. Perfect. Now we have currently changed our database thoroughly, so we need to reset our database and migrate with new tables and a schema again. Just head over to your package.json file here and add this new script, the new reset script here, which is first of all gonna reset the database and again migrate it as before. So open the terminal and type npm run db reset, hit yes, and again specify a new name for your migration, again as before. I'm gonna type init here. Perfect. Now just head over to your developer settings of your GitHub account again. As you can see, because we have signed in with GitHub inside our application, we have one user tracked by the GitHub itself. So because we have changed many things since then till now, and we have also changed our database schema so far, just click on revoke all user tokens here, and currently the GitHub won't track our previous user and everything is reset by GitHub. This is one of the most common things that you're going to do in creating and developing an OAuth authentication system with different providers. Now again, try to run the Prisma Studio again. As you can see here, we have more tables like session table, user table, account table, and so much more that we have migrated our database with. Now, to make things a little bit more improved and enhanced, we need to create runtime validations for our users' input using a very simple schema using Zod. Just install the Zod package like this and create a very simple sign up, sign in schema in the lib folder with the name of, for example, schema or user schema. It doesn't really matter for this tutorial, and create a very simple schema like this. Import the Z from Zod library and create an object like this. For the email, we're gonna need the user to enter a string of type email and a password field, also a simple string with the minimum length of 1, and then I'm gonna export it from this file. Perfect. Now again in the auth.ts file, to solve and remove these errors here, first of all, we're gonna validate our credentials like this using our Zod schema await schema. Also, we're not gonna need await here because it's not an asynchronous process. And then we're gonna parse our schema using the credentials, and if the credentials does not pass the requirements of our Zod schema here, it's gonna throw an error here at the parse level, and the code won't be executed from this point till the end. So we're always sure that this validated credentials is always gonna be of type email and password. Otherwise, it won't be continued to the rest of the code. So instead of using credentials, I'm gonna use validated credentials for both email and password. But the thing that I forgot to do is to add our password field to our user column. So it's not a big problem. Just head over to the Prisma schema here and add a password field column to our user table like this. It's going to be optional or whatever that you want. And again, run the npm run db reset, hit on yes, and name it whatever that you want. And perfect. Then the error is gone. And now our user table has email and password like this. Also, currently, our user needs to sign up into our database. So in the lib folder, create another file called actions.ts. And here we're gonna do this sign up logic, which is gonna be responsible to create a new user entry inside our database. So I'm gonna create a function called sign up. It's going to be an async operation. We're going to get the form data from our user with the date type of form data like this. And as before, we're going to return our execute action. And inside that, we're going to pass our action function, which is of type async. First, we're going to get the email from our form data like this, our password from our form data like this. And then we're gonna validate them with the help of our custom schema that we just created. We're gonna parse our schema with the email and password. And after that, if the validated data is valid, we're gonna await and do an operation inside our database, which we're gonna create a new entry for our users table with this data, with the data of our validated email. Also, we're going to make it lowercase to prevent case matching problems. And also for the password, I'm going to pass the validated data.password like this. And at the end, we're going to export our sign up from our actions file here. And then to use this inside our application, just head over to the sign up page. And here, exactly below our use server directive here, just paste our newly created sign up action and get the form data with the type of form data from our form action. And if the result of this server action is of type success, we're going to redirect the user to the sign-in page to sign in with the credentials that he has provided in the sign up phase. Also, at the top of the component, don't forget to add the session checking. And if the user is logged in into our application, we do not need to show the rest of it, and we need to redirect the user to the homepage of our application. Perfect, but this is not enough to our sign up process using credentials with database strategy on Auth.js to work. And when it comes to signing with credentials with Auth.js, things become a little bit complex, but pretty reasonable because we need to expand our auth config a little bit. So to handle authentication using credentials with database strategy, we need to expand and enhance this config here. We need to simply add and extend two other methods here. First of all, is going to be the callbacks method on auth config here. So inside this callbacks function, it's going to provide us with the JWT method here. And we need to specify that if the user wants to sign in using the credentials instead of OAuth, for example, GitHub, we need to change something on our token object. For example, making the credentials field on it to true. Otherwise, return the starting token. So at the next phase of our authentication, we are sure that user is trying to log into our website or application using the credentials strategy. So after that, with the preceding operation after our JWT callback here, we're gonna extend the JWT method on our config like this. But just make sure that you have the UUID library installed to create a simple, valid, secure session token when the user tries to sign in using his credentials. Then try to import it like this. Import v4 as UUID from UUID, which is perfect. And at the end of the file, just import the encode from next-auth JWT. So the thing that this method, this JWT enhanced encode method is doing is first of all checking the method that the user tries to sign in into our application. If you recall earlier, we have changed the credentials property on our token into true if the user is signing in using the credentials method strategy. And if the user is doing this, first of all, we're going to create a session token. Then we are gonna check the validity of the token like this, that whether the token has the user's ID on it, otherwise we're gonna throw an error. After that, if all the things are validated till now, we're gonna create our session using our adapter here at the top of the file here, which is gonna create an instance using Prisma adapter by passing our database connection. Then we're gonna create session with this data, with the session token generated by UUID library like this, with the ID of the user getting from the token parameter on our params object, passing to the encode method on JWT, with setting an expiration date for 30 days, or you can change it to, for example, a week like this, or for this tutorial, the 30 days expiry date is enough. And also, if the method wasn't able to create a session on our database, it's gonna throw an error and that's it. And else, if the user is not using the credentials method to sign in, we're gonna proceed with the previous encode method and we're not gonna overwrite anything in that case. Now let's see all the implementations in action. Just run the development server again, head over to the application, and for example, try to sign up and create account, whatever that you want. For example, something like codegenics@gmail.com with the password of 1234. Then hit up sign up. And now if I try to log in with something different than email we just created like this, we're not going to be able to sign into our panel. And you must also handle the errors generated by Auth.js. But if I try to log in with the valid email that I have signed up on the application itself, codegenics@gmail.com, with the password of 1234 and hit on sign in, the operation wasn't successful because I made a mistake earlier in the tutorial. Just head over to the project here, and in the actions file here, I did a mistake, and instead of passing the email here, I passed password, so change it to email, and again run the development server, head over to the sign up page, and again I try to create my email like this with the password of 1234. I try to sign up, and then I try to sign in with the created email and password like this. As you can see here, I've been able to log in and register using credentials. And if I try to show you, let me just create another terminal here and run the npm run db studio on it. We see that our user is created here, and also we have a live session like this on our database. And the beauty of it is that we can, for example, remove this record from our database like this. Let me just remove it from our database. And if I head over to the application again and refresh the page, we see that our user is automatically logged out from our panel. So we can directly manage our logged in users with different sessions and accounts. And again, if I try to, for example, try to log in with my email on my GitHub account and try to authorize with it, we see that I have been logged in into the application with my email on my GitHub account. And if I check the user table, we see that I have signed in one time with the GitHub provider and also another time with the credentials provider. Also, my GitHub session has been created on the database session table. So this was the most common case scenario that you're going to be encountered when handling authentication in Next.js app using database session strategies and Auth.js. If you have any questions regarding the video, just feel free to ask in the description down below. I hope you have learned something. See you in the next video.